We're back in session. Mr. Durst is here with his lawyers, and Mr. Henderson and colleagues are here for the people. If you'll read the exhibit. Are jurors coming in? Oh, they're coming in now. All right, never mind. Present in People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. DeGuerin, Mr. Chestnut, Mr. Henderson is at council table. His colleagues are present also. We're going to resume that videotape testimony of Detective Michael Struk.
So, Your Honor, I'm playing 57, People's 57. This is day 4. We should be able to finish the video before the afternoon break. We're starting at 14 minutes and 31 seconds.
Well, theories as to whether or not he may have sent it, or somebody betrayed him, or it was a group of news that maybe the contents of it was a lot of malarkey to send us in a different direction. So we just, I guess at that point, just kept it in the folder or put it someplace, and that's my recollection of that document.
So if I asked you on a scale of 1 to 100, 1 being I'm not sure at all, and 100 being I'm absolutely certain, how sure are you that you did not personally receive these materials from Ed Wright?
90%.
Now, Detective, when you got these materials, you are trained and you understood, correct, that you are not legally allowed to be reviewing materials from a defense lawyer or an investigator under their employ. You understood that, correct?
Correct.
Detective, then, why, when you received them, did you go through them?
My guess is everybody had read them even before I walked into the squad.
Well, Detective, the NYPD provides homicide detectives and detectives in general training on what materials they are allowed to review, correct?
Yes, I can be sure.
Listen, isn't it true that when you reviewed those materials and you knew that they were coming from Mr. Durst's private investigator, then what you are legally obligated to do, ethically obligated to do, and procedurally obligated to do by the New York Police Department is to put those down, contact Mr. Scapetta or Mr. Wright, and tell them, you know what, I've come into possession of something I'm not supposed to have. You were aware of that, correct?
It was not done.
Well, that was my question. Listen, you knew that you were looking at something you weren't supposed to look at.
I guess you could say that.
Okay. And you did not contact at all Mr. Wright or Mr. Scapetta, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you know, what did you do with those documents?
I think they wound up in a case folder.
Detective, did they wind up in the NYPD folder, or did they wind up in your personal files that you took with you when you retired?
I believe they came with me.
So, Detective, you did not make any copies, any notations, nothing in any document to say that you received these files, correct?
I don't think so.
Detective, you had a chance to go through your chronology. You would agree, Detective, there's no way that you could have written, I received these privileged materials which I'm not supposed to look at, and now I'm going to document that I received them. You knew you were doing something you weren't supposed to, and you took the stuff, and you took it home with you, correct?
Apparently, yes.
And in fact, Detective, you have later stated, correct, that you did that because you knew you were not allowed to use anything that came from Ed Wright in your investigation, correct?
Well, I knew we couldn't use it, and we didn't use it, so at that point, it was just something from the folder.
And in fact, isn't it true that the only reason that these documents came to light is that when you did your interviews with Andrew Jarecki and Mark Smerling, that you gave them access to all of your personal files, correct?
I did let them look at everything they wanted to look at, in hope that they could help develop this case further, just like everybody else I spoke to.
David, I want to be clear. In no way am I insinuating that you did not want to solve this case. I want to be clear. Clearly, you wanted to solve this case. What I'm pointing out is the mistakes that were made despite your intentions. But I want to go back. Isn't it true, detective, that you did not realize that you were giving Jarecki and Smerling copies of materials that you weren't supposed to have?
Probably a poor choice at the time, yes.
Detective, you did not go through your materials before you gave them to Jarecki and Smerling, correct?
I probably didn't sift through them thoroughly.
And the reason you gave it to them, correct, is here's two guys that are interested in trying to figure out what happened, and you were trying to help them any way you could.
That could be so, yeah.
All right, I want to talk about your relationship with Jarecki and Smerling. How did you meet them?
They contacted me.
I'm sorry?
I said they contacted me, yes.
Do you remember when you met them?
No.
Instead of showing you that slide, which we previously marked as 104, Your Honor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you what you stated, Detective Struk. You said, I never had any political pressure, if that's what you mean, as far as the mayor's office had an interest in it. I think it would really be reasonable to conclude that the mayor's office would have an interest in it because of the prominence of Durst. And you know, he owns a lot of real estate, and he rubs elbows with these people. So I'm sure they wanted to know, but nobody ever called me or pressured me or chastised me in any way. First of all, is that do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
And does that sound like something that you can recall saying that you said?
Probably would have said that again.
Oh, you're. I read you, after all that detective, I read you the wrong one. Let me go back to the one I was supposed to cover. We still don't have MS-19, right? Okay. So I had asked you about the parcel issue in Connecticut, and this is what you said. You were asked, was there ever a moment, by Mr. Green, was there ever a moment when you thought you were the closest to actually cracking the case? You responded, I was, I guess, kind of hoping that when, after we retrieved the phone records and realized that he had lied about where he was on February 2nd, up in Connecticut and stuff, even though I knew in my heart that it wasn't enough, because there are ways of answering around that, I thought it was starting to fall into place at that point. And then it kind of lost momentum again. Do you remember telling Mr. Jarecki that during your May 27, 2011 interview?
I probably did.
And you're referring, am I correct, you're referring to the fact that you caught him in what you believe was a lie when he was saying that he was in Connecticut on the morning of February 2nd, correct?
That's correct.
And how was it that you caught him in a lie?
There were many inconsistencies as the case went forward.
Well, let me ask the question differently. Were you referred to in your statement right there, you talked about the phone records. Are you referring to the phone records and collect calls from New Jersey on February 2nd?
That would probably be about it, yeah.
And can you explain what that meant in terms of your investigation, what it was that you learned and what it was that affected your subsequent investigation?
Yeah. Later on, the telephone records we had went to locations in the Jersey Shore, and well, I believe there were collect calls on the toll records into his business that was generated from locations in the Jersey Shore, and to what he had said where he was to me on the first or second, I forget which day it was. Those things, and around that juncture, started to become a lot more compelling to us that maybe we could bring the case forward and look for either an arrest or a grand jury.
All right, I'm going to return to this. I want to go back to where I was. I was asking you about your interaction with Mr. Jarecki and Mr. Sperling. Would you describe your cooperation? Were you fully cooperative?
Yeah, I thought I was, yeah.
And what was your motivation for doing this?
Well, to help bring a conclusion to this case.
I would assume then you would not have accepted any money for participating in that, correct?
They had wanted to speak to me on several occasions, and I did. And there was one day that I had an opportunity to work. So I said to them, I would like to be compensated for a loss of pay on a particular day, and they did pay me for one day.
Do you remember how much they paid you?
Several $100.
I'd like to mark as people's next in order. It's going to be, what is it? 106.
106 is what is it?
It's going to be a check. Do you recognize this check, Detective Struk?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what the amount is and who it's paid out to?
$800, and it's made out to Margaret Struk.
So when you said a couple $100, that's the couple $100 you're referring to?
Yes.
Is there a reason why the check was made out to your wife and not to you?
I think at the time, in putting a lot of time at it, a lot of time out of the household, and when these people would come, they would come with cameras and whatnot, I pretty much just said to them, I think Mars has been inconvenienced more than I have, so why don't you give it all? There was no secret to it. That check is a check.
I just want to ask, and again, I'm asking you the question.
Yeah.
Did you do it to mask the payment that was being made to you, or was it solely for the reason you indicated?
These are the reasons I just stated.
Okay. You testified on direct that despite your cooperation with Jarecki and Sperling, they did not treat you fairly. Do you recall testifying to that?
Yes.
And Mr. DeGuerin indicated, you agreed, that they manipulated the editing. Is that correct?
I don't remember that being discussed.
Well, let me ask you, can you tell me what statement or what you viewed as an attack did they make on you or present that you believe was inaccurate?
I thought in my heart, after me trying to help them bring this case to a conclusion in any way they could, that when they offered a TV personality to condemn what we did in the New York City Police Department, I thought that was cheesy, and I let them know.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, you're not arguing that the criticisms that they made about facts of what had happened, you're not saying you had an issue with that, correct?
No, I didn't bring up any specifics to them in my complaint or getting.
So, you're in no way, Detective, saying that Jarecki and Sperling distorted what you said. You're saying you did not like the fact that they brought in Janine Pirro to come. Is that correct?
That's correct. I thought it was unfair and unnecessary.
You gave Joey Becerra also copies of your file. Is that correct?
I gave just about anything I could to anybody who needed help on this.
I want to talk about, you made notes about all good things. Do you recall that?
Was that a book or a movie or?
That's the movie. Can you put up LAPA 4801, please? Mark people's next in order.
7,
1 moment, John.
107, 107A.
4801. Detective, can you take a look at that document?
Hold on.
Good evening.
Are you showing a document or a film clip?
No, document.
People's 4801, I'm sorry.
107.
People's 107 is a 2-page document.
So, and it'll make it easy for you.
More than just.
Detective,
I'm sorry, this your board, just hold on. Yeah, you'll need to describe it, label it, as you mark it, and have a better idea than more than 2-page document.
Detective, this is a document that starts off, it appears to be, it's a Wikipedia entry from the movie All Good Things.
Okay?
And then it has a paragraph that's typed that appears to be from Wikipedia, and then it has writing, printing, and underline. Do you recognize that writing as your writing?
Yes.
And you would agree, the type section at the top, you did not write. Correct?
Yeah, I don't think I did that.
And Detective, if you can, I'm going to give you a second here to review this on your own. Let me know when you're done and when you need it advanced. Mr. Milius can advance it for you. Let me know when you've had a chance to review it and ask me some questions about it. You just let me know when you're ready, Detective. Yeah, one more. There's one more page now, so we'll move it down. This issue to refresh your memory. Do you recall making these notes?
Yes.
Okay, I want to ask you about it. You said that the film did not touch enough on R.E.'s involvement in Kathie's demise. If so, it would have greater impact on chopping up M.D. R.E., I assume, is Robert Durst. Is that correct?
Go back to where that was.
It's on the first page. Right at the first line.
What are you specifically referring to now?
So,
This is the document that I gave to you, right?
Durst involvement referring to Robert Durst, correct?
Yeah.
And Kathie referring to Kathie Durst, correct?
Yes.
And can you tell me what you meant by that it didn't touch enough on his involvement? What did you mean by that?
Apparently, when I wrote these notes, I guess I had in my mind that that this was more of a theatrical thing and didn't touch on the points that I thought were maybe more would have had more impact.
And you've got below it says Connecticut Live with an arrow, correct?
Okay.
LBI, and what does that stand for?
Yeah, but I'm writing these things long after I'm retired, I believe.
Detective, that's not my question I'm asking. I understand that.
Right.
I'm simply, you have to be writing long after you retire because all good things did not come out until 2010 or 11, so we understand that. So my question though for you is, what did you mean it's got an arrow that says, Connecticut, and then it has an arrow to LBI. What's LBI? What is LBI?
Long Beach Island.
And what is Long Beach Island?
What is Long Beach Island?
Yeah, we're not, we have a Long Beach here, I don't think that's what you're talking about. Is that a place in New Jersey?
Yeah, it's a beach area. It's on the Jersey Shore. It's
near the Pine Barrens?
yeah, it's either north or south of it, but it's in that vicinity.
And what is the Pine Barrens?
Pine Barrens is I think it's a protected state park or whatever. It's a very large area.
It's known for its soft sand, correct?
Yes,
And it's known as a mafia burial ground, correct?
it certainly had that connotation over the years, you know.
In fact, it was even featured in The Sopranos, is where they would take people down in the winter, dig them up and put them there, correct?
That would be a fair thing to say, yeah.
And when you say a large area, you're talking about more than 1 million acres, correct?
It's very large.
And so you've got, it says LBI, then it has an arrow to phone, collect calls, and laundromat. Is that referring, Detective, to the collect calls that came into Mr. Durst's employer at the time from these areas in New Jersey that would be Pine Barrens and or on their way back to New York City / Westchester?
I would believe that's what that reference is, yes.
And then you have the word laundromat. What does that mean?
So I think one of the calls that were generated from the toll rates was from outside a laundromat.
And I'm going to get to, you have the word Burberry coat. I just want to establish that's there. Is that correct? Burberry coat?
It's hoops.
You have the word, it looks like Burberry coat, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if it's spelled right, but that's what I mean. Yeah.
And then you have an arrow to Nick's Scapetta. What does the last arrow to Nick's Scapetta mean?
I don't know. Why I arrowed to Scapetta, I'm not sure.
Okay, you also write in this document, the writers, AJ, etc., Andrew Directy, excuse me, hitched their wagon to Gilberta and Miss Sarah. What did you mean by that? Hitched their wagon to Gilberta and Miss Sarah.
Well, I think, especially Gilberta, who I always considered had a very strong opinion on all parts of the case.
Let me just stop with that. She was very hostile towards the investigation that you had done, correct?
Yes.
Is it fair to say, Detective, that she was maybe even tougher on your investigation than I've been?
That's a toss-up right there.
Detective, you also told Mr. Directy, you said that, quote, regardless of the murder, so you wrote down, regardless of the murder victim, she was 90%, 95% disposed of on the Jersey Shore. Correct?
Yes, certainly. After all those years that expired, that's my view started to come. These are my comments basically about this TV production. And I'm doing that from information that I had gleaned and learned over all these years, all these other books and movies and people doing whatever they're doing. And so obviously I felt in making these comments that I had a lot more information to talk about than I did in 1982.
Let me move on. Can you tell me, when I say the names Geraldine McInerney and Mary Hughes, can you tell me who they are?
Mary Hughes is the sister of Kathie Durst. Her maiden name is McCormack. Oh, and Geraldine McInerney was her boss and friend, I guess.
And by her, Mary's boss and friend, correct?
Yes.
And someone who was also nominally acquainted with Kathie Durst, correct?
Yes.
And McInerney is spelled MC capital I-N-E-R-N-E-Y, Geraldine common spelling. When you first met Geraldine and Mary, that was very early in your investigation, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you became aware at that time that through the company they worked for in advertising, that they had access to concert tickets, correct?
Yes.
Did you ask them for tickets to the Rolling Stones and Neil Diamond?
No.
Did you ask them for tickets to anything?
No, I didn't ask him for anything. I was offered her comp tickets, Geraldine's comp tickets to the Neil Diamond. The other concert you're talking about, what was that again?
Rolling Stones.
That wouldn't interest me. But I did receive 2 tickets from her for Neil Diamond, 2 free tickets that she got, I guess, through her work.
Detective, I just want to be clear, is it your position that you never attempted to solicit tickets to the Rolling Stones, where you got them or not, never requested that they could get tickets from either Mary Hughes or Geraldine McInerney?
I have no recollection of asking for Rolling Stone tickets.
I want to ask, when you say no recollection, Detective, would you agree that it would be improper for you to either solicit or accept concert tickets from the family of a suspected murder victim that you're investigating? Would you agree?
The tickets that I did accept for Neil Diamond was told to me that they were free and then offered to me as such, that she did not pay for them. So it was just tickets that were common tickets that if I wanted to go and take somebody, I could, and I did accept them.
So let me ask you this. One of my questions on the detective is, do you think that accepting tickets in that capacity, in that scenario, do you think, first of all, that is in compliance with the standards that existed at the time for New York City police officers?
I guess sitting here today, I wish I had not done it, but it didn't seem to compromise anything at the time, and it was a gesture that was offered to me, and I took them.
There's, I'm going to ask again, please try and answer my question.
Okay.
And I'll leave it if that's easier. Isn't it true, detective, that there was a policy, even back in 1982, that you were not to be getting freebies, either given or solicited, from witnesses or victims in cases you were investigating?
I think that would be fair to say.
So you disregard that policy because you're saying kind of no harm, no foul, they're free anyway. Is that correct?
That's the way you're turning it, and then it was a mistake, sure.
Now, I want to be clear. If either Mary Hughes or Geraldine McInerney has stated that you were hitting them up for Rolling Stones tickets, would your testimony be, are you saying, no, there's no way that would have happened, or are you saying, you know what, I don't remember, but I guess it could have happened?
I do not recall that at all. Rolling Stones, it is not my cup of tea. I don't believe that I would have ever asked for that.
So what you're saying, I don't understand, so what you're saying is, it's not, no, I wouldn't have hit up the witness and the victim's sister in this case for concert tickets. It just wouldn't have been for the Stones because I don't really like them.
I think that's more accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
is it fair to say that during the pendency of the case, that Geraldine and Mary Hughes would provide you information on the case and ask you to follow up?
Yes.
It's fair to say that was also being done by the friends of Kathie that you talked about, Geraldine, Gilberta, Ellen Strauss,
Yes.
Kathie Tradesman, was that another one?
I guess.
Traystman, Kathie, Kathy. And is it fair to say that at different times, all of these individuals expressed frustration with you at what they believe your efforts were on the case, correct?
They were always very demanding and always questioned me as to why we had not arrested Bartos. And I understood their feelings on it, but it was our feeling to conduct the investigation according to how we were going to do it. And that's just because they were very animated about their views in the case. And I understood that. But
Detective, at the time, is it fair to say that it would not have been NYPD procedure for you to travel out of state with witnesses in a case in their car as part of your investigation, non-law enforcement witnesses? Would you agree?
no.
That was permitted?
Yeah, if the boss says that to do that, regardless of what vehicle, we may not have had an available vehicle. I think we only had 2 squad vehicles. So to tie it up for a day for certain things, but it would be sanctioned by the boss, and my guess it would have been called into CB.
And is it your memory that you took a trip to Shippon, New Jersey to follow up on the collect calls that we discussed with Mary Hughes and Geraldine McInerney?
Correct.
Is it fair to say that they actually had to borrow a car and drive you down there a second time, correct?
Are you saying that on the second trip or the second time I went down,
Yeah, on one of the
they then provided the car?
That's possible.
So when went to it and it's completely.
And in fact, isn't it true that they actually gave you a case of beer that was in the trunk of the car that they borrowed to go down to Shippon?
That is totally beyond my memory. I don't remember anything like that.
So I want to be clear though, there's a difference between, I want to make sure, are you telling me no, there's no way I would have ever accepted a case of beer in those circumstances? Or are you telling me, you know what, I don't remember that happening?
That's what I'm saying. I don't remember that happening.
So you can't agree, you can't tell us, you know, like, no, I never would have accepted a case of beer. You're just saying, you know what, yeah, I could have accepted a case of beer from him, but I don't remember. Is that correct?
I don't remember anything about a case of beer, Mr. Lewin.
Okay. All right, I want to remember this 1 second. Okay, I want to ask you about the collect calls. You were aware, correct, at the time of your original investigation, you were aware of these collect calls. Is that right? These. Oh, well, these, okay. You testified to collect calls that were made on February 2nd from New Jersey. Do you recall that? You said there were collect calls from Shippon, New Jersey, from several different places in New Jersey.
Yes.
That were collect calls to the Durst family business, correct?
Correct.
And you became aware they were from one Shippon, from Barnegat, New Jersey, correct?
Yes.
One of the calls came from laundromat, correct?
Excuse me, I think from a coin box outside the laundry.
And your theory at the time was that Bob Durst had taken Kathie's body and he had driven it down to the Pine Barrens area and discarded it, correct? That was your theory.
That was certainly one of the theories, yeah.
Well, did you have another theory at the time as to what had happened?
Well, having no exact knowledge of what had occurred, I mean, that was certainly a theory that we had felt that it could have been the Pine Barrens, but it also could have been any properties that he may or may not know own because of the several realty companies that he was affiliated with.
You gave an interview, detective, again, I referred to you before, for ABC on 7/25/01, vanished the whole case of Kathie Durst, LADA 089-835-089849. In that interview, you were asked whether you were aware of the collect calls from Chip Bottom to the Durst organization at the time of the investigation. And your response was, quote, "You see, this is an area of the case that I would prefer not to get too deep into." Do you recall that response?
I couldn't get that response.
Can you tell me why you would respond that way? What did that response mean?
Because I didn't know if it would compromise the case at any point someday down the road. So, sitting here, that would be the reason I could think of why I would have said that.
Did you give Mary Hughes and Geraldine McInerney copies of the phone records in this case?
Yes.
In fact, Jeff, isn't it true that you gave them copies of the phone records because they were the ones chasing down what the numbers were, correct?
They were primarily offered to them. I discussed it with my boss, and it was because they were more familiar with numbers that were were used more than they would be familiar with. And then they turning numbers with our Coles directory unit. It was a lengthy process. And so just to expedite it, that's what we did. And the boss was in full accord with that.
Detective, did you also give Geraldine and Mary copies of every one of the records from the Durst organization, from Mr. Durst's apartment on Riverside Drive, and from the house in South Salem?
I don't recall.
Well, detective, is it proper as an NYPD detective for you to be sharing evidence in the case with witnesses that you are collecting pursuant to that case, some of which doesn't even involve those witnesses? Is that proper?
Mr. Lewis, there came a point when the case was getting colder. I know my boss's philosophy was that whatever it takes to help get this thing going, that we would do it. At that point, it didn't seem to be any kind of an issue to ask anybody for help. So that's why that occurred.
So you're saying you got to the point where, in essence, you're saying, you know what, maybe they're going to find something I'm missing, maybe they're going to have time I don't have, so you know what, I'll give it to them.
That's reasonable, yes.
You would agree, though, that that absolutely is a violation of NYPD written policy, correct?
I don't know that to be a fact, and I'm just, so what I'm telling you is that prior to giving them anything for assistance, it was discussed within the team and with our command.
Okay. Did you find a burglary code in the Riverside Drive apartment?
When you say fine, it was observed. I believe after I had the crime scene unit process the apartment, I think Bill Mueller was with me at that point.
He's deceased, correct?
That's correct. Bill is dead. And I think Geraldine and Mary had come to Riverside Drive. I had a conversation with Lieutenant Guiney after they had processed it for blood or any other trace material. And I guess we had a conversation relative to if they could come in and look then at the apartment after it was processed to see whether or not they could notice anything that was remarkably different as to what whether there was a rug or a chair or something that was missing that may have been contaminated and now gone. So that's what it was, and it was as a result of that when the comment or we had learned about the burglary code that became important later.
And tell me, what was it you learned about the burglary code?
Well, when you think back, when I think back about the collect calls that were generated from coin boxes down in Chipmunk, that it certainly seemed odd that a burglary code, which I understand is expensive, looked like it had been in a washing machine.
So let me stop you. So the burglary code that you're seeing, and your understanding was that's a dry clean only, a very expensive code.
I guess, yeah.
That you're seeing this code in a condition that looked like it had been laundered, is that correct?
Yes, but I don't know if that was discussed on the premises or later when we had left.
And because of that, is it correct that you became suspicious, that connected you back up to that collect call from the outside of laundromat, and you thought, you know what, the coat was being washed because it had been dirty, disposing of county dirt. That was your thought.
That was certainly possible.
You didn't collect that coat, though, did you?
No.
Can you tell me why you didn't collect the coat?
I'll take a guess. Sitting here 35 years later, the fact that it had been through a washing machine, there was no such thing as DNA in them days, so it was just more or less contents noted, and it just stimulated us as to the that phone call being generated outside the coin box.
This was a man's coat, correct?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Burglary coat. It's a man's top coat, I think.
Yeah, it appeared you looked like a man's top coat, correct?
Yes.
And it appeared to you, your understanding was this was Bob Durst's coat, correct?
My recollection is when the code was brought to my attention was, I think, when we left, and one of the girls said, "Did you see the coat?" I recall the coat hanging someplace on the door handle or on the top of the door, and then we discussed it that way. It was not handled or looked at that particular time, and it was discussed, I think, shortly after we left.
Detective, would you agree that even if there was not DNA available at that time, there was blood typing back in 1982, correct?
Blood typing, yes.
And you would agree, Detective, that looking at a coat yourself, you can't tell whether there's blood on that coat or not, correct? Unless it's a large amount.
That's correct. Correct.
So, Detective, you have a coat that you notice that is inside of Mr. Durst's apartment. It's in a condition to you where it looks like it's been laundered when it shouldn't have been, and you have a call from outside a laundromat, and yet you don't collect that coat. Let me just ask it this way. Would you agree, Detective? And I'm not asking looking back 35 years. I'm saying with what you knew then, would you agree, yeah, I should have collected that coat?
Sitting here today, do I wish we had snatched the coat?
No, Detective. No, Detective.
Like I just said a little bit earlier, Mr.
Detective.
I didn't think...
That's not my question. Listen again. What I'm asking you is, would you agree that what you knew back in 1982, when you saw that coat, the information you had, that a competent detective would have taken that coat and looked into evidence so that, one, it could be checked for any kind of blood evidence that was not visual to the naked eye, and two, so that you could potentially have it examined to determine that it had been washed, and that might circumstantially establish your suspicion. Would you agree to that? Would you agree, Detective?
The presence of the coat was brought to my attention after we had left.
Detective, okay. How about this idea? Are you ready?
Yes.
Turn the car around and go back and get the coat.
That was not done.
Okay, so, Detective, I'm going to ask you, please, if you can, give me an answer on this. Will you agree, Detective, that you know what? Yeah, I screwed that one up. We should have collected that coat. Yes or no?
You can consider it a mistake sitting here today, yes, I would go along with that.
No, Detective, I'm not asking you sitting here today. I'm saying with what you knew on that date, the information you knew. Look, do you know if there was sand in that coat?
No.
What if that coat was full of a bunch of sand, Detective? Would that have been helpful?
Possibly.
So, Detective, the problem is that because you didn't collect that code, we'll never know what evidentiary value it did or did not have. Would you agree?
That would be fair to say, yeah.
And Detective, that is a decision that even on the day it happened, you now realize was wrong.
Yes, it was wrong. There are a lot of things I wish we would have done. When you look at it that way, it seems to have been a mistake.
All right, Ted, I'm going to another area, and I want to give you some very precise instructions. I'm going to ask you some questions right now. And I do not want you, unless asked by Mr. DeGuerin, I do not want you to use any names. Do you understand?
Yes.
Did you learn during the individual investigation who Mr. Durst's close friends were? Who were his close friends? Did you learn that?
That would be fair to say, yeah.
And who did you identify as the close friend of Mr. Durst?
One of them was, I guess, Ms. Berman and Bruce Farrell.
Okay.
Fellow named Oliver, I think.
Doug Oliver?
I don't remember the first name.
Did you come across the name of Nick Chapin?
I don't recall right now.
So you were not aware that Nick Chapin was one of Mr. Durst's closest friends at the time?
Sitting here today, I don't recall the name.
Would you agree that in an investigation like this, where you have a suspect, that it is extremely important to learn who they are close to and interview those individuals to find out what information they might have?
That would be fair.
And to the best of your knowledge, you never were even aware of Mr. Chapin, correct?
Sitting here today, like I say, the name doesn't.
If you had contact with Mr. Chapin, there'd be some indication in the notes, chrono, etc., correct? I want to talk about Susan Berman. Is it fair to say that when you interviewed Susan Berman, you treated her as simply someone who was providing background information? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You never, in fact, in your interviews with her, you only talked to her briefly, is that correct?
Yes.
And is it fair to say you never went after her in an interview, is that right? Is that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, the reason you didn't go after her is because at the point you were interviewing her, you had no idea that she potentially might have information about the actual circumstances of Kathie Durst's disappearance. Is that correct?
Correct.
At some point, though, during your original investigation, you became aware, correct, that if anybody knew information about Robert Durst, it would likely be Susan Berman, correct?
Well, her name was mentioned as a very good friend. To say that she was exclusively the only one that would know about what he does, I don't recall that being the case.
You mentioned that during your investigation, at some point, you've given a couple of different answers, but you conceded that at some point during your original investigation, you became concerned that Kathie Durst, in fact, had not made that call to the dean. Is that correct?
That was much later on.
But by later on, it was during your investigation. It would have been in 1982, correct?
Or 83.
Okay. So during your original investigation, you became concerned, correct?
Well, yes.
And by the way, at that point in time, did it occur to you, you know what? If Kathie didn't make the call. And if it's a woman that called, maybe I should go back to the one woman's name who came up as a very close friend of Mr. Durst, Susan Berman, and re-interview her a little more aggressively. Did that occur to you?
No.
And would you agree that that's something that with the information you had then, you probably should have done?
I don't think so, but
Tell me why. Why do you not think that that's something you should have done?
she was put forward as a friend, a good friend, as well as several other people. I had no reason to believe that she may have been the one to make the call to Goodman.
Well, let me back you up, Detective. You know at this point, you're suspicious now that Kathie Durst didn't make the call. You know it's a...
Correct. Much later on.
Okay.
Yeah.
But during your original investigation, when you still had access to Susan Berman, correct?
Yeah, I guess at some point, sure.
So you know that a woman has made this call, and you know that Susan Berman is functioning as Bob Durst's spokesperson, correct?
Well, I wouldn't categorize it as his spokesperson. She was interviewed like many other people, and she provided information. But to think that she was behind that phone call early on, that never came to anybody's.
Detective, what I'm asking you though is, by the way, are you aware that she was widely quoted in the newspapers in 1982 as his spokesperson? Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of her sitting here today as his spokesperson.
Yes, Mr. Durst's spokesperson.
I don't deny that happened, but I just don't recall it.
So, Detective, my question to you is that you have a woman who is very close to Robert Durst. You are now suspecting that Kathie didn't make the call, and that obviously you know it's a woman, and it's got to be a woman, if Kathie didn't make the call, who's going to have a connection to Bob Durst. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, it would be, if a woman other than Kathie made the call, it could be anybody.
Well, it would have to be somebody who is close to Bob Durst, who is assisting him to a close knowledge, correct?
No, that's fair.
So, Detective, wouldn't it be common sense and just competence to go back and interview this woman who you at this point know is one of his closest friends?
She was spoken to, and she did respond to phone calls, I think, or she had to go back and, but as far as going back and re-interviewing her, it just never materialized, or that much importance at that point early on.
So that's what I'm telling you is, I'm asking you, I understand you did not deliberately not interview her because you didn't want to learn information. I'm saying, with what you knew at the time, should a competent investigator have gone back and taken a run at her to see if, you know what, she didn't want to make the calls?
I'm sure there's a lot of things that could have been done.
What's that?
I said, I'm sure there are a lot of things that could have been done.
Please, I'm going to ask the question once more. You said there are a lot of things that could have been done. I'm asking you, do you agree now, having been presented with that information, that recontacting Susan Berman and aggressively questioning her is one of the things that should have been done at that time?
Moon, I don't remember sitting here today. Her importance rising to that level that would have warranted going back and doing her again.
Let's talk about Matt Burkett. Who's Matt Burkett?
In fact, wrote a book.
That's B-I-R-K-B-E-C-K, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Burkett wrote a book. You gave him your materials on this case, correct?
Tried to help him with anything, yeah.
Were you ever paid any money by Mr. Burkett, anyone related to Mr. Burkett, any publishers, any money at all relating to the book or research that you wrote?
I don't believe so.
Wouldn't that be something that you would know either, yeah, I took money, or no, I didn't?
I'm telling you, I don't remember taking any money from Burkett.
Well, Detective, wouldn't it have been in your position at that time investigation that you investigated and never solved? Wouldn't that be your position?
Like I said, I don't recall him paying me. It's many years later. I'm a civilian. I don't know what my relationship with him, whether it was ever financial. I really don't know.
But sitting here, you can't rule it out, can you?
Sitting here today, I can't rule anything out.
Exactly. So let me ask you this. How many hours do you think you spent talking, writing, discussing this case with Matt Burbank?
I don't know.
Dozens of hours at least?
I don't know.
Maybe hundreds of hours?
Close enough.
Well, okay, so would you agree dozens of hours speaking to him?
I don't remember how many hours.
And you exchanged emails, correct?
Sure.
And this relation with Matt Burbank went on for years, correct?
For years? I don't recall that being for years, but
Detective, isn't it true that you spent more time talking to Matt Burbank about your investigation than you actually put in originally doing the work? Isn't that true?
I don't know that to be a fact, but if it helped in the investigation or bringing this to light, sure, why not? But I don't recall how much time I actually spent with him. It was quite a while ago.
You've spoken to other individuals in the media, is that correct?
Yes.
You did a court TV documentary on January 10th, 2002. Do you recall that?
I guess. Yeah.
Did you get paid?
I don't think so.
So when you say I don't think so, it means that you cannot say, no, I did not get paid.
What I'm saying, I don't remember, and I don't think so, is what I'm saying.
You mentioned consideration in LADA Bates page 4263. You mentioned the word consideration in a contract that you signed. Does consideration mean money?
It certainly could, yeah.
You also had an A&E documentary in 2001. You did. Did you get paid for that?
I don't know.
Do you think it's appropriate, Detective? Do you think it's professional to capitalize financially on a murder case that you never solved?
I think it was appropriate to try to bring to light anything about this case so it could get solved.
Was there anything, Detective, preventing you from bringing stuff to light without being financially compensated?
I don't know if I was compensated, but again, I don't know.
Well, my question, Detective, is you said, listen, I wanted to bring the case to light. I just want to be clear. You agreed, Detective, that you didn't need to accept financial compensation from anybody in order to bring the case to light. Is that correct?
What do you mean by a need?
What's that?
What do you mean by a need?
Detective,
If
let me answer your question.
sure.
You have indicated that you're not sure if you in this case from different people. You recall that testimony, correct?
Correct.
But you can't say that you didn't, correct?
Correct.
And you said originally I took a couple $100 from Jarecki Sperling, but it turned out to be $800 in check made out to your wife, correct?
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, you responded, I did that because I wanted to bring light to the case. Do you recall that testimony 2 minutes ago?
Yes, that's true. As I stated at that time, if I had a work assignment that I would have had to give up to stick with Jarecki, then I would have wanted to be compensated, just like compensating any witness in the court case. That's for loss of wages.
So, Detective,
That's where that came from.
so when you say that you wanted to bring the case to light, what you're saying is listen, I'm happy to talk about the case, but if I'm going to talk about the case and spend my time, I want to get paid. Correct?
Well, it would be a bad thing, but I don't think that was a precedent that happened with every person I spoke to.
Do you find that conduct, accepting money, from individuals on a case like this that you didn't solve, do you find that to be professional?
I think that's open to interpretation as far as me being a civilian many years later, if I'm trying to help.
I'm not asking interpretation, I'm asking you. So I'm not asking what other people think, I'm asking, do you consider that to be a professional act of accepting money from people who are doing stories on this murder case that you were not able to solve? Do you think that's professional?
I don't know if it's unprofessional, whether or not you see it in a poor light, I can't.
Who is Liz Jones? If I told you that she was a cleaning woman who worked at the South Salem House in 1982, would that refresh your recollection?
No.
In fact, Detective, you never contacted Liz Jones, and none of your people contacted her, correct?
That name doesn't ring a bell.
I can tell you there's no mention of Elizabeth Jones in your reports, etc., so you agree that would need to be a contact her, correct?
Yeah, I don't remember her name, but it's not in my notes. And
Are you aware that she was contacted and re-interviewed during the reinvestigation by the New York State Police?
no, I'm not aware of what they did.
Are you aware that during that investigation, she told New York State Police that Robert Durst had told her to throw away all of Kathie's stuff after she disappeared? Are you aware of that?
I recall some incident about him looking to discard her clothes. Whether it was her or that name right now doesn't ring a bell to me.
Jack, isn't it correct that what you're referring to had to do with the East 86th Street apartment in the city and not with the Westchester house? Is that correct?
Again, sitting here today, I don't have a very specific recall as to locations or names. I'm doing the best I can. I haven't seen my notes or my paperwork in a couple of years until last week, and I've seen part of it. So I'm trying to answer your questions the best I can.
Jack, you just reviewed all your notes or your notebook on this case within less than last week, correct?
I did look at it. Yes.
So you agree, Detective, that had you been aware that the cleaning lady at South Salem, that she had been told by Bob Durst very soon after Kathie Durst disappeared to get rid of all of her stuff, that would have been something significant that you would have looked at?
Well, yes, everything is significant, but if he is in that frame of mind where he thinks that she left him, and he says, well, screw it, I'm going to get rid of the clothes, he can make so much out of that, but I don't remember all the details of it.
That's one interpretation. Another interpretation being that, you know what, he got rid of the stuff of his missing wife because he knew she wasn't coming back because he killed her.
But yeah, you could think that as well, sure.
Detective, isn't it your responsibility as an investigator to assemble all of the evidence possible so that it can be looked at and evaluated later to determine what it all means? Isn't that your job?
Sure, if the evidence is brought forward and we've seen something, well, then it's logged in and it's memorialized.
Ellen Strauss was another friend of Kathie's, is that correct?
Yes.
And you ended up, at one point pursuing your investigation, did you go to a party at Ellen Strauss' house in Connecticut?
It was a gathering that we were invited to hopefully gain some intelligence or information. It was a gathering with Kathie's friends at the Strauss's residence. In the hope that maybe this gathering would have produced produce some information that would have been helpful to the case.
Did you or any detective with you spend the night there?
Yes. On the couch.
Do you believe it was professional to spend the night at witnesses' houses?
Well, since we did nothing wrong, I don't see any problem with it.
Did you spend the night, detective, because you've been drinking?
I don't know that I've been drinking or not.
Well, detective, would it make sense for you to be spending the night at the house if you could drive back home?
That's a possibility.
Do you think it's professional? Ellen Strauss lived within an hour to 2 hours of where you live, correct? The most?
I don't know.
Well, detective, I'm asking you, do you believe it was professional to spend the night at a witness's house during the investigation?
I really see no problem with it if it was sanctioned by the boss and if he knew we were not there.
Who is Joey Becerra?
Sarah is a investigator with the state police.
And did you have contact with Mr. Becerra?
Yes, I do.
Did you give him your records in the case?
Yes, I did.
Did you write a letter to Mr. Becerra, Investigator Becerra, thanking him for the police cards he sent?
I could have. That's common practice between law enforcement agencies.
Do you remember writing, detective, I immediately stuck one on my wife's car. Wow, what a driver. She needs all the help you can get. Do you recall writing that?
Sure, why not?
So basically, you talked to this New York State detective. While you're talking to him, you said, hey, can you give me something, give me some cards I can put in my wife's car to help her get out of tickets. Is that what the deal was?
Absolutely not. And I probably gave him a bunch of DEA cards and window stickers as well. I mean,
What did you mean my wife needs all the help she can get? What does that mean?
it was in jest. My wife doesn't drive or state.
Have you ever spoken to Charles Bagley?
Yeah, recently.
Did you speak to him prior to this round of initial examinations? Have you ever spoken to him?
No. Not in an informal way. He had contacted me and I told him at that time, I said I didn't think I could, that it would be professional to do that.
So you've never done an interview with him, correct?
No, not a formal interview.
Have you done an interview with?
Did he call me and ask to speak with me in an interview? Yes, he did, but we never got into a Q&A type of thing or anything of any length or any degree, no.
And you said that you didn't do that because it, quote, wouldn't have been professional, correct?
I believe that's what I told him.
So, detective, there are certainly activities and issues that come up where you have the ability to discern what is professional and what isn't, correct?
I do the best I can.
Do you recall telling the media, and this is from the New York Post, 11/12/03, LADA 083 358 through 088 362. Do you recall saying that the investigation was hampered by conflicting jurisdictions and eventually ran out of steam?
I think the word conflicting is probably not accurate. I probably meant the fact that the investigation was parceled between upstate and down in the city. I don't believe that I in any way inferred that they were interfering with us.
Well, in fact, Detective, New York State Police did not have any active missing persons investigation involving Kathie Durst, correct?
I don't know that to be a fact.
Well, Detective, what I believe you testified to, and I want you to do the following. Inspector Hardy, Trooper Hardy testified here, and his testimony was that he was called in to take simply a report regarding burglary, and then he spoke to Bob Durst, but that the investigation was being handled by NYPD, and you specifically. Is that your understanding of what was going on?
Again, how he categorized his investigation, if any, I don't know.
I'm asking you to categorize what you knew, what you believed.
I knew that we had communicated with him and with Senior Investigator Lowell or Howell. They assisted with phone records and various things. So if I would sit here, I would have to assume that they were assisting me in any way that they had paper on it.
Detective, did you tell People magazine in their article, Resuming the Search, dated December 4th, 2000, which would have been about 3 weeks before Susan Berman would be murdered? This is at LADA page number 090247 through 090251. And again, it's 042859 42863. Did you say, at that time, when there was a missing person without the obvious presence of foul play, you can't run a full-blown investigation? People take off on their spouses every day. Did you say that?
I could have said that.
So, Detective, you were conceding to People magazine that you never did a full-blown investigation, correct?
That was a general comment that we did to people.
You said you can't run a full-blown investigation without the obvious presence of foul play. You said that, correct?
I may have said it, or meant to say it, with the absence of foul play, that an investigation usually wouldn't go forward.
Well, the words you used, Detective, at that time when there was a missing person without the obvious presence of foul play, you can't run a full-blown investigation. Are you disputing you said that?
I'm not disputing it at all.
So, Detective, if you don't do a full-blown investigation where you interview everybody, look at every possible crime scene, how are you going to assemble that evidence of foul play?
Mr. Malone, we did a lot of work on the case. Did several hundred activities with regard to the investigation. Again, I've said multiple times here on the testimony, there's no perfect case. There are things sitting here today that I've learned over the years that I wish I would have done. But at that particular time, I think that's a tough one.
So as you sit here, you are still sticking to the fact that you ran a, quote, professional, unquote, investigation.
I'm sticking to the fact that we did the best we could.
Okay, Detective, you said people take off on their spouses every day.
Yes.
You were dismissive from the beginning, Detective, of the idea that Kathie Durst, originally, you were dismissive of this is just another missing person, some woman's not happy with her husband and she took off. That was your mentality, wasn't it?
No, sir.
Well, so Detective, when you said people take off on their spouses every day, why don't you explain what you mean by that?
Just exactly what it means. People take off on their spouses every day.
Detective, do
Every day.
husbands kill their wives every day?
Of course not.
Husbands do not kill their wives every day, Detective.
Some do.
Well, Detective, I didn't mean that every husband kill their wife.
That's what I thought you meant. Sorry.
No, Detective. What I'm asking you is, you're saying that spouses take off every day, and I'm simply saying, would you also agree that husbands kill their wives every day?
Sometimes, sure.
You also told them in the same article, quote, there were always a lot of unanswered questions, but we had to move on because I did not have the luxury of working one case. Do you recall saying that?
I may have.
How many other cases were you working, Detective, at the time that Kathie Durst disappeared?
This case, I worked fairly exclusive until early spring. Then it didn't. Then the case went cold. I was hospitalized. Probably came back during vacation swings, and I was removed from the chart. Went back into the case. And what I remember reading recently on my chronology, I think sometime in December of '82. So there was a hiatus of about 6 months where the case lay.
Detective, my question to you though is, when you're saying I did not have the luxury of working one case, did you ever go to your chain of command and say, you know what, here's what I need to solve this case. Give me X number of detectives. Did you ever do that?
I may have. Again, I may have, and we have a lot of team meetings. If I'm out of the picture, whether the case is being assigned, is manpower within the squad to do it. I can't say why the boss or anybody did anything at this point.
But you've also testified, Detective, that to the best of your memory, you were never turned down for one request for any assistance in this case by your supervisor.
Well, that's true. If there was an issue that was very important and we needed extra manpower after the case had slowed down and going fairly cold, we would have received it. I guess it's asked for.
Mr. Lewin, I think that our reporter needs a break. So,
Okay.
Right? She's been going since 1:30.
Again, by the way, I can tell the board, absolutely, I'm going to finish today.
Okay. So we'll return at 3:30. Robert Durst, versus here with the lawyers. Mr. Lewin and his colleagues are present, representing the people. Detective is resumed to stand to remain under oath and continue your cross-examination.
Tim, do you recall telling the New York Post on pages 088358 to 088362 that if you had known that Kathie was going home...
I'm sorry, repeat those numbers.
Sure. 088 358 to 088362. That if you would have known that Kathie was going home to confront Bob Durst, it would have changed the focus of your probe. Do you recall saying that?
I don't recall saying it.
Is that consistent with what you believe?
It could be.
So, detective, that quote would seem to suggest that you did not know at the time during the original investigation that Kathie Durst was on her way back to Westchester from Gilberta's house to confront Bob Durst. Is that correct?
Like I said, I don't recall that sitting here today. I'm not saying I didn't say it. When did I say it anyway?
You said it in 2003, detective, 2003, 11, 12, 2003. But listen to my question. That statement says that if you would have known that Kathie was going home to confront her, it would have changed the focus of your probe. Detective, would you agree that in that statement you are saying that you did not know that information during the original investigation?
I don't know.
Well, detective, why else? Unless you assume that you said those words, I can pull out the argument and have you read it. Do you want me to do that?
No, I'm not saying I didn't do it. I'm just saying I don't recall it.
So you're saying that if you didn't know Kathie was going home to confront Durst, it would have changed the focus of your probe. So my question to you is, detective, when did you find out? When were you made aware that in fact Kathie Durst was going home to confront Bob Durst? When did you learn that?
I don't recall when it was said. I had some recollection of something like that being said. Where it came from and who said it, at this point, me sitting here today, I don't.
Detective, would you...
I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying that I don't remember the specifics of it.
Detective, I'm asking, would you agree that that statement, if you said it, clearly, that statement clearly is implying, if not outright stating, that you did not know at the time of your original investigation that Kathie was going to confront Bob Durst, because you're saying, had you known that, it would have changed the focus of your probe. Do you agree that's what that statement is saying?
I can't answer that. Mr. Lewin, if I said this in 2003, I probably said it thinking that would have certainly helped. But if I'm saying this in 2003, I don't know if I'm saying it at that point based on fact or a document, but sitting here, I'm saying that, yeah, if I knew she was going to go home and they were going to have a fist fight over it, yeah, it would have changed things, but that issue never came up because we always thought that she didn't wind up in the city on the first.
Well, Detective, that's not true because you were told by Bob Durst that she came back to the Westchester house. Do you recall that?
My answer would be, saying what I did in 2003 or whatever it was, would probably be something that I would think would have been positive at that time. Knowing that she was going to go home and confront him. But when I made that comment, I don't know if I was making it out of a positive investigative way or whether it was based on fact that I had a recollection of it. I used to get calls quite a bit from different people or newspapers and looking for comments. That's really all I can say to that.
Detective, would you agree that that quote, when you read it, appears to be stating that had you known that information, that Kathie was coming over to confront Bob Durst, that it would have changed your approach? Would you agree that's what the comments appear to be saying?
Yes.
So, Detective, are you aware that there have been numerous witnesses in this case who have come forward and have provided evidence that Kathie Durst had stated that she was going home, that she was angry about Peter Schwartz, and that there was evidence that she was going home to confront him? Are you aware that that evidence has come from several different witnesses in this case? Are you aware of that, Detective?
And a lot of people,
Detective, that individuals who were at that gathering said that Kathie and Bob argued over the phone. Are you aware of that?
I believe I recall something like that.
Well, are you recalling something like that from your investigation, or is that something you learned later?
No, I believe that part of the investigation was that when she left her brother's house, she had consumed a lot of wine, and that was what I recall the most, was the fact that they had been drinking that day.
Well, you spoke to, originally, you spoke to Peter Schwartz, correct?
Yes, I believe I did.
Do you recall what Peter Schwartz told you? Do you recall? Oh, I'm sorry, this is
He the guy that got kicked in the head?
What's that?
I said, was he the guy that got kicked in the head?
Did Peter Schwartz tell you, do you recall if he told you that he had a phone conversation with Kathie while she was at Gilbertus, and that during that conversation, he basically told Kathie that he was not going to go forward with his legal action against Robert Durst? Do you recall that information?
Yes.
And that Kathie's response was that she was very upset about it. Do you recall that?
I believe so, yes.
So, Detective, when you told the New York Post in 2003 that had you known Kathie was going home to confront Durst, it would have changed the focus of your probe. You knew that that's what she was doing back in 1982. Isn't that correct?
No, again, I'm telling you, if I made that comment to a newspaper person in 2003, I may have just winged it and just said that at that point.
Do you think winging it and, quote, just saying something to the press about a murder case, is that professional?
Look, I do what I can to try to get information out there, to assist with the media if the media has to actually play a role in bringing forth witnesses or.
Can you feel a responsibility to make sure when you talk to the media that you gave them accurate information?
Well, I could have believed it at that time.
Well, didn't Gilberta Najami tell you repeatedly, detective, about the whole situation with Peter Schwartz and how upset Kathie was, and that she was coming home very upset to confront Bob Durst? Were you told that by Gilberta Najami?
Possibly, yes.
So, detective, would you agree then that whether you intentionally misrepresented to the Post or not, forget about that for a second, the information you gave them that, quote, had you known Kathie was going home to confront Durst, you actually did know that information, correct?
I may have known it during the course of the investigation, but when I uttered those words to the Post, I may have forgotten that.
Okay, all right, let me continue. I'm almost done here, detective. After this examination, would you agree that there are many, many things that we did mistakenly and you do different? Would you agree?
I'm sorry, say that again.
After this examination,
Right.
coming here, would you agree that there are many things that were either mistakes or that you would have done differently? And I'm not asking you looking back in hindsight. I'm saying mistakes or omissions that you should have been aware of back during the original investigation. Would you agree?
I'll agree with that.
Okay. Assuming the crime scene was in Manhattan originally, assuming Kathie made it back, that was now you mistake, correct?
I'm sorry?
Assuming that the crime scene was in Manhattan, and whatever happened to Kathie was in Manhattan, you'd be a mistake, correct?
That it was a mistake?
Yes.
Later on.
Because you don't believe the crime scene was in Manhattan, correct?
Now that's getting into
You agree now that not searching the house in South Salem, you now agree that was a mistake not in 2020 hindsight. It was a mistake that you should have been aware of at the time it happened during the original investigation. Correct? Correct, detective?
You categorize it as a mistake. I think we, in conjunction with the state police at that point, just did not think it was worthy of a search warrant or going any further than what the trooper had seen when he went in.
Not following up with the trained people, would you agree that that's something that would have been advisable for you to have done?
Again, that was Gilberta's input, and at that point, it just didn't seem important.
Detective, just so it's clear, I'm asking you now, you had the benefit of a couple of days of cross-examination. So I'm asking you, now that you're sitting here, and I'm going back, and I'm giving you the opportunity to come back and look at the information and say, yeah, you know what, now that I've had a chance to think about it, you know what, I've changed my mind. Yeah, that was a mistake. If you don't think it was a mistake, I don't want you to say it, but I'm trying to give you that opportunity. So again, I'm going to ask you.
You can do that, yes.
Okay, so I'm not asking you again why you didn't do it. I'm saying, do you agree that not following up with the trained people or passengers and showing Kathie's picture, that was a mistake?
It probably would have helped, yes.
Okay, do you agree that not going back and re-questioning Robert Durst once you found out the inconsistencies in the statement, not making that effort, that was a mistake?
It was our strategy early on, was, let's say, within the first...
Wait, detective,
trying to...
here's what I'm asking, so I want this too. I'm trying to make this clear. If your answer is no, you don't need to give me an explanation. I'm trying to give you the opportunity right now to come back, now that you've been here, listen to all this, and see if anything's changed your mind. So I'll just ask, is it yes or no? You're not to explain why. So my question is, do you agree that not going back and making the effort, trying to re-question Bob Durst, once you found all of these lies and inconsistencies, that was a mistake?
I had a hard time saying it was a mistake early.
You can say no.
Yeah. Well, if that's the only way you're going to answer it, then that's what I'm going to say. What I'm just saying is that early on in the case, we wanted him to think that, quite frankly, that we were asleep at the wheel. And,
You wanted to think you were asleep at the wheel, or you were asleep at the wheel?
well, you can term it that way, but what I'm telling you is that we did not want to confront him because there was always the lawyering up issue, which he later did, and that's what the boss has said we should do.
All right, Detective, he had told you that the call from the payphone in South Salem, correct?
I'm sorry?
Bob Durst told you that he made a call from the payphone in South Salem where he talked to Kathie Durst that night in Riverside Drive, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And you are now aware, Detective, from other information, you are now aware that Mr. Durst has stated that, you know what, that wasn't true, I made that up. You're aware of that new information, correct?
I'm aware of that, in addition to, I think the detective had walked towards that coin box and felt that there was an inordinate distance, and that probably didn't happen.
Detective, why didn't you do a phone dump on that payphone? You could have done that, correct?
I don't know, had it been?
What's that?
Did the state police do it? They did a phone dump.
Well, Detective, here's what I can tell you. There's not one indication in your report, in your notes, anywhere, that anybody did a phone dump on that phone booth in South Salem. Do you agree?
I'll say I agree, because I don't specifically recall, but I agree.
Detective, the alibi that Durst gave, you agree, that was an alibi that he gave to you, correct?
Yes.
So, again, Detective, you now conceded, I believe, that a phone dump was not done on that payphone. Do you agree, Detective, that even with what you knew at the time, you can either call it a mistake, or you can say, if you don't want to use the word mistake, you say, yeah, that's something we should have done. Maybe that's easier for you to say. Is that something you should have done?
Perhaps, yes.
Okay. Not knowing Kathie's rotation schedule and grades, in hindsight, do you think that
Grades?
how she was doing in that
Grades. You
grades?
said grades.
So grades. Do you agree to that? That that's something that you should have done?
You can look at it both ways, because some of the doctors said that she was in jeopardy, and then some said she was doing well.
You didn't know. Had you got her out how she was doing, correct?
Yes.
And Detective, in fact, Bob Durst told you that Kathie, during his original statement, he mentioned he wasn't concerned about her because she was staying overnight at school. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Detective, had you gotten that paperwork, you agree that you would have learned that Kathie was assigned to a rotation that was a clinic that was basically banker's hours, and she wouldn't have been at the hospital. Would you agree?
Had that been done, yeah, we probably would have learned that.
And Detective, had you learned that, that would have been yet another big lie you would have caught Mr. Durst in, correct?
There were many inconsistencies in lies. That would have been another one.
Okay, not interviewing more of Kathie's classmates and co-workers, including, for instance, Dr. Peter Halperin, the person who I went to his statement yesterday at the New York State Police Tower. Would you agree? Is that something you should have done?
Perhaps. Yeah.
Not interviewing the people at the Roberta's party or gathering. Is that something you agree you should have done?
Well, we did. When we went up there to speak to them at, or Gilbert's, oh no, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about Strauss.
No.
I think at the Gilbert's gathering, I think that, I don't remember who all was there, but I think their comments trickled into us one way or another as the case went forward.
Wait, did you just say that their comments trickled in? Is that what you said?
That's my term, sir.
Detective, are you aware
Not making
of
a
an, are you aware of an evidentiary basis in New York where you can introduce statements of people you don't talk to because their comments trickle in from other people?
It was a poor choice of words, so.
Well, Detective, in fact, it was a poor choice of words because that's what you did. You did not go out and interview the people that were there to find out what you knew, what they knew, correct? You didn't do it.
I guess not.
And Detective, would you agree now that that was something you should have done?
There were many things we should have done.
Is that one of them?
Yes, that could be.
Do you agree that not interviewing Eleanor Schwenk, who gave that very damaging interview to the New York Post, I believe on June 3rd of 1982, where she mentions this horrific beating and request for hospitalization of Kathie Durst, do you believe that, again, that is something you should have done, located and interviewed Eleanor Schwenk?
That was, did you interview her, you saying?
Eleanor Schwenk gave an interview to the Post I showed you yesterday where she talked about how Kathie had called her and told her Bob was beating her and that Eleanor had told her you have to go to the hospital. Do you agree, Detective, that you should have gone and interviewed Eleanor Schwenk?
I don't know in the article, when she made that comment in the article, I don't know if I was in the case at the time. You were saying it was June?
Detective, during your investigation, did you ever find any credible evidence that Kathie Durst had voluntarily taken off and abandoned her life?
No, sir.
During your investigation, did you ever find any credible evidence that Kathie Durst had killed herself?
No, sir.
I believe that at one point, Mr. DeGuerin mentioned suicide the other day. You had mentioned suicide. Do you recall that? It's a possibility.
Early on, anything's a possibility.
Detective, are you aware of cases of suicide where the victim, after killing themselves, disposed of their body?
No, unless they go in the water. Sometimes they don't come up for a long time. But that is a difficult.
And Detective, would you agree suicide by drowning is very unusual suicide, correct?
Not really. They jump off the GW bridge quite frequently, and they come up months later in the spring.
Detective, when they jump off the bridge, they don't drown. They die of blunt force trauma. Do you agree?
Well, it's still suicide, so. Yeah.
So Detective, are you telling me then that you mentioned suicide because you had credible evidence that Kathie had jumped off a bridge and never come up?
No, I'm not implying that at all.
Did you ever find any credible evidence that Kathie Durst had overdosed on drugs?
No.
During your investigation, did you ever find any evidence that anyone other than her husband, Robert Durst, was responsible for her disappearance and death?
No.
Mr. Chesnoff stated during your cross-examination, he got up and he said that you didn't really make any mistakes in your investigation. Do you now agree with that statement?
I certainly believe that other things could have been done during that time, just like any case. And I will certainly accept the fact that other parts of the investigation could have been done.
As you sit here today, more than 35 years later, you've now reviewed the evidence in this case, you've gone through your notebook. Is there anything you have found which changes the opinion you said during the point in your investigation that Robert Durst is responsible for the death and disappearance of his wife? Do you understand what I'm saying?
No.
Yeah, let me re-ask that question. As you sit here today, it's been 35 years. You've now reviewed your notebook, you've gone through the evidence in this case. Is there anything you found that changes the opinion that you have given previously that Robert Durst is responsible for the death and disappearance of his wife?
No.
Detective, finally, have you ever thought, and I'm wondering if this is a reason why you had an issue taking, would you agree, Detective, that it's been hard for you to be up there and to be asked questions where you have to, or you're asked to take responsibility for mistakes? Has that been hard for you?
Of course, I'm human.
And do you agree, Detective, that because of that feeling how hard it's been to be up here and to have your investigation worked over, is a part of your reason that you've been reluctant to accept responsibility? Because to some degree, you realize, Detective, that had you done a better job in this case, that Susan Berman and Morris Black would be here today?
I certainly sit here today and wish we had done other things and more things. I will certainly grant you that.
But I'm asking you, Detective, do you feel, I'm trying to understand, do you feel a sense of responsibility that because of the job that you did in the case, the mistakes, omissions, etc., that, you know what, because of that, Susan Berman and Morris Black aren't here today? Is that a part of what is affecting your answers here?
No, sir.
Jack, do you think it's fair, given the now mistakes, omissions you admitted to, do you think it's fair for you to be asked the question, hey, listen, if you had done a more competent job, do you think that Morris Black and Susan Berman would still be here? Do you think that's a fair question?
It's certainly a question that could be asked. Yeah, I can't refute that because I don't know what would have changed anything.
I'm going to ask you, I want you to listen very closely to what I'm saying. All right? I do not want you to use any names. All right? Do you understand that?
Yes.
Did you, during your investigation in this case, back in 1982, have sexual relations with a witness, an individual who was involved in this case?
Yes.
And detective, without going into the person's name, I want you to describe what happened, but do not use the person's name. And if there's another person involved, you can refer to that other person as the other person's friend. You understand that?
Yes.
Please describe what happened.
I had received a phone call and I was asked by one of these people whether I would join them, I believe the next day, to look at the premises of where one of them had lived and to see if there was any relevance to the case. I was asked to come at the end of the day to accommodate their work schedule and mine. I went there. On entering, the individual that I had sex with told the other one, I forget the exact words, "Don't you have something to do?" She left, and after that, the person that I had sex with initiated something that I went along with.
What was that? She initiated oral sex?
Yes.
And did you, at that point, did you stop her?
No.
All right, so did you have oral sex with her?
Yes.
Okay, please continue.
From that point, when I was nearing orgasm, I then said to her, "Are you okay with that? Or would you like to finish in a conventional way?" From that, we then went from the couch where I was seated and slid onto the floor. And then we had intercourse on the floor.
Detective, in any way, was this anything other than a consensual encounter?
No.
Detective, you have talked about the professional way you handled this case. Would you agree that that kind of conduct was about as unprofessional as you could get?
Yes.
And so, detective, at the time, detective, you were aware that it was improper to have any kind of relations with a witness or potential witness on the case, correct?
I would agree with that.
We all make mistakes, detective. My question to you is, can you explain how you let this happen? And more than that, how you let it happen, first the oral sex and then sexual intercourse. How did you let that happen?
I'm going to answer it the best I can this way. I was so taken back by how this began, how she came to me, and We never had any conversation, other than her stating this was going to happen sooner or later anyway, or something to that effect. And then she began opening my trousers, and it went from there.
Your Honor, if people have no further questions. Your Honor, I don't think we established, it's a minor point, but I don't think anybody established. Detective Struk, how old are you?
I'll be 74.
Thank you.
Detective, you are now excused to this matter. Unless we do it again, but you're excused from these proceedings, so thank you. Please sit down.
It is now time for our recess. We will resume at, we'll resume at, in 15 minutes at 20 till, no, let's make it a quarter to 4, 3:45. Do not talk about the case or about any of the people or any subject involved in it with anyone, including the other jurors. Do not make up your mind about the verdict or any issue until after you've discussed the case with the other jurors during deliberations.